Well, good morning, everybody. I hope your Tuesday's starting off well. Yesterday, between each one of the flights I took to get out here to Salem, as soon as we land, I'd jump on and see if we could get some new model updates because something didn't feel settled about the pattern we analyzed yesterday. And one of the big topics, in fact, the big topics we're going to cover right at the beginning today, one of those big ones was South American rainfall. Now, we were expecting through the next 5 days extremely hot conditions here, temperatures 105 to 110. In fact, I got a report from a friend of mine that lives in Goiás. He said his daughter, when she came from school today, reported that several of the kids were throwing up at school because it was so hot. He mentioned himself that it was almost difficult to breathe. 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, high temperatures up around 40 to 44 C, and they're waiting for some relief here. Well, the models teased at the end of the weekend about a frontal boundary that was actually going to make its way past the flooded areas down here in southern Brazil and start to work its way into central and northern Brazil. And the newest model runs, the last two, kind of confirm this. You just kind of see here that out there past about day 6, 7, we start to see some of that moisture move north, and that's going to bring not only an end to the really, really hot conditions, but possibly the best chance at getting some rainfall. So what's amazing about this isn't monsoonal. I mean, this is actually a frontal boundary that's made its way up from Argentina getting into central and northern Brazil. So that's what it took to kind of break this down. Now, some of you are watching this probably going, yeah, Eric, this is next week. Prove it. Let's see it. I feel what you're talking about there. But I've seen some of the ensemble simulations, and I've been watching this carefully, and there seems to be a more robust signal that we're going to actually get a front to push all the way this far to the north, delivering some relief. Now, how long does it last? Do they go back into the dry conditions? Those are all possibilities. I'll show you that at the end again. But that's the first of these kind of bigger stories I'm following. The second one had to do with the position of this cutoff low over California. As you just look at it yesterday, it actually broke off into two pieces. You can see two separate lows here. But it is even farther to the west than originally anticipated. And that was important because this was going to be the wave that would be the beginning of a progression in the pattern to deliver multiple systems to the midsection of the United States, an area that's been very, very dry. And now that I see this kind of lazily sitting out here and spinning with a wave breaking over the top of it, it kind of changed my perception of maybe what this low could do, not only for California, which you'll see those precip totals in a few moments, but what happens when it finally does get picked up by the flow late this week. That also changes the temperature pattern. Like, look at the next 5 days. We knew it was going to be really hot in the midsection of the country. But as we approach day 5 through 10, which is here, this is when we expected to start to see a much deeper trough settle into this section of the country. Well, the newest kind of trend in the models is to not do that and instead dive much of this colder air to the east of the Rocky Mountains. And you'll see in the newest simulations, this is backed up by the GFS ensemble, that day 5 through 10 time period, which of course takes us through, time period just before and then through through Thanksgiving and beyond, where now we're starting to see, first of all, less of a kind of a deep plunge into the cold air, and secondly, more of an eastward extent to it. And I don't like seeing that because what this would suggest is that the jet stream is going to go back to some ridging here and troughing east. Now, the problem with that pattern is that you have convergent flow in the middle. And convergent flow, I'm talking about a loft. That's a drier signal into this area. And it's a colder one east, but it's not the type of setup to make the second half of this month really, really active. Now, again, we're just watching model trends and discussing them here, but I think they're more robust than anything else. At least I could discuss overall with this pattern. We'll get into some of those details in a few seconds, but this is it right here. Okay, this is the wave break that's currently occurring. See this coming over the top, and there's your cutoff low to the bottom. That wasn't quite as well realized, I think, in the previous run. Now, sometimes you see a high or low on the west coast, like, oh, if that gets stuck, we're in trouble. We don't see that. The wave is still expected, I'm talking about this guy, to move out by the end of the week into early next week. So here we are on Sunday night, really Monday morning. But the difference is, remember how yesterday I talked so much about that omega block? Where did it go? I mean, it's just out. It's no longer being resolved by the models. And there's still some sense of an Alaskan ridge. But what this does is this affects the pattern to the south of it. So you see where the ridge now sets up over the west, that pushes this trough farther to the south. You see, if you could have kept that omega block here, and it would have done this, it would have kept this trough, the guy I'm drawing an X through right here, right through the middle part of the country. And now the pattern kind of fell apart, and I need more time, honestly, to diagnose exactly what happened here. But I'll spend some time today looking at this. What we end up getting, though, is by Thanksgiving. Look at this deeper trough over the east. So yeah, we'll talk about the colder air there. But this particular setup is just not one that makes things really wet across the country. It's the wrong setup overall for that. So I get you out to about 10 days from now, and then we play this on through the very beginning of the last week of November here, and I don't see the right setup to deliver the promised 2 systems I keep mentioning across the midsection of the country. So we'll keep watching this. The end result is that the week 2 pattern, I know the CPC is still wet, but the European trended wetter south and east, drier in the west, and the GFS isn't having any of it. I mean, it's keeping a lot of the country with drier conditions except for the Gulf Coast. Okay, so that's the big things I'm watching. Let's kind of walk through some of the details here. Last 72 hours of total accumulated precip has been very heavy rainfall in parts of Texas, especially along the Gulf Coast. We've had some better rains that have even made it over into parts of Georgia, South, and North Carolina. We need this pretty badly. As we look at the setup, though, there's a couple things I will be keeping an eye on. There's our cutoff low. I'm going to watch. There is a boundary in through here, through which we're expecting a little short. We have to kind of sneak and move along. What really caught my attention, though, was the depth of this trough that is helping with the rainfall across the Gulf Coast, because the models want to actually take the moisture that's just offshore here and curl it up into what looks like a little tropical system. Now, as of early this morning, the National Hurricane Center wasn't mentioning anything about it, but take a look at what the high-res NAM did with it. So this will start at 7 a.m. I'm recording just a little bit after 6 o'clock Central Time today. And what we're going to watch is through the day on Tuesday into Tuesday afternoon and evening. Again, just much needed rains getting across parts of the south. So this has been a bit better forecast than anything else. But will you watch right here with me? What we're seeing in the models is that this low that's sitting offshore, like the NAM is like, hey, curl that thing up. Look at this. This is almost like a little tropical system down here. I'm kind of going back and forth over midday tomorrow on Wednesday. And if that happens, it slows down. It delivers more rainfall around its northern and northeastern side. And it probably means more thunderstorm activity for Florida. Now, at this point, I don't know. I have to watch it. It's actually in all the models that it's kind of trying to curl up a bit like this. But I don't think this is tropical in its nature. I'll need to look into that more later today as I kind of watch the forecast evolve. The other part of it is, remember that frontal boundary we mentioned right in through here? This is where we got some light snow coming through in the day on Wednesday toward Thursday, and you can see the next frontal boundary. Let's start again with Wednesday afternoon, delivering some more precip to California. So widely scattered, but locally some heavier rain coming into California, all on the periphery of that cutoff low that's sitting there. Okay, from this point forward, let's go ahead and have a quick look at the 7-day forecast, the newest one this morning from the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center, part of NOAA. And again, it's got better than 1.5 inches, continuing to cover a section of the country that's extremely dry. But it lost, as did the ECMWF and the European model, the sizable system in the midsection of the country here as we go forward. So while this map has a lot of color on it, just take a look at the color bar and you'll be able to see what we're looking at here in terms of precipitation. So we've seen changes with the midsection of the United States system, the East Coast system, and how much moisture is expected to still come into the West. So to see those changes, I'm going to take you to the comparison between the GFS and the European model. And I'll tell you, both models are both performing at about the same skill level right now, but they certainly give us different solutions once we get out there about 6-7 days. So we've seen through Wednesday. And let's start this right here about Thursday, 6 a.m. So there's the front delivering some snow into parts of Montana, getting out to the southern parts of the Canadian prairie. Here's the heavy precip that could be surrounding that weak circulation. It's in both models there. And our cutoff low is still sitting here, cut off by Thursday. And as we work our way into Friday, that low that sat on that front then races up into parts of the Hudson Bay and eventually here. It's in both models, well resolved, and it drops a front, and the timing's a little bit better on the models. The GFS is a little faster than the European, but it is what is keeping whatever this low is out to open ocean, not letting it bring good rains into parts of the Carolinas. So that's this Friday. That's at least consistent with the message I gave yesterday. Now, what we saw in the models yesterday has changed to this by the time we get into this upcoming weekend. The wave that's hitting the Pacific Northwest continues to be resolved in a similar fashion in the European. It's weaker in the GFS. Could be some snow that surrounds the Great Lakes this weekend. And then as we get into early next week, okay, this right here on Sunday, this was the broader low that we were expecting to really just open up into the middle part of the country. This is the one I was worried about for severe weather. South, I mean, there was a lot going on with this low, and now the models just, I mean, really dig it farther to the south. Do not open up such a large sector of moisture. There's still the risk of strong to severe storms in the mid-south and south. The GFS squishes it even farther down into Texas with more cold air with it. And that system now, instead of curling up into a pretty big system in New England, just kind of passes through as a front. And the GFS says, well, maybe something here, but this is not a strong enough signal out there next Wednesday, Thursday to really have much to go on. But this was my first of two big systems, and now it's not so big coming through here. And then if you remember yesterday, I said, wow, the GFS was taking more of the moisture in British Columbia. The European was plowing a system into the northwest. Where's that system now? It is no longer there in the forecast, and now we're seeing more moisture getting up into British Columbia. So maybe the GFS got that one right for this area. So if you just notice my tone here, a whole lot has changed in the span of 24 hours with some of the forecast models, and we do rely on those to kind of pick up on these patterns. So let's go ahead and look at some of the totals. We'll start with the European model, just to add up total accumulated precip, and this is through Saturday, getting into Sunday and Monday. I'm going to stop it out there at a week. So coastal California, we do have better chances in California of getting a ½ inch to up to 2 inches of precip. Same thing for like the I-5 corridor here. But this is the system that has been really just tamped down in the models because of the shift in the size of that omega block we talked about. So that's 7 days out from the European. Look, whole of the mid-Atlantic left high and dry. Much of the northern United States from the upper Midwest, northern plains are dry. Canadian prairies dry, except for the little stripe of snow coming through here. And this is what the GFS does. And it's even drier. So European there, GFS, even drier. In fact, you want to compare the two. This is the difference. So everywhere in these greens is where the European's a wetter model. These shadings down here represent where the GFS is. And overall, this is going to be the potential for the largest bust right here in the middle part of the country. Now, really quickly, I do want to show you an update on the 7-day snowfall outlook. So there is colder air. There is a low. Remember that deep low off California. We have snow coming to the Rocky Mountains, but it's not, major snowfall getting added up. And if you remember a week ago, we thought that parts of the Sierra Nevada would pick up 12 to 20 inches out of this. That's no longer in the mix here. There's our little stripe of snow coming out of the system early. And outside of that, we'll have to wait on some much colder air. So let's go have a look at some probability maps. Chance of getting an inch in the next 10 days. All right, that's a chance of getting an inch. If we look for those wetter corridors, we'll see that if we step this up to 2 inches, there it goes. This will be our best chance around the little weak circulation down in the Gulf. And then most of California has now been taken out of that probability. Oh, sorry, the model flipped over. Didn't even see that. Sorry, 6Z just came in. Let's take you out there 10 days. But you'll notice that most of California really doesn't have the same kind of high probabilities of getting 2 inches that we expected. On the dry side of this is the newest 10-day outlook for who has a chance at seeing less than a ½ of an inch. And if it hadn't been for that big storm system back at the end of October that delivered the moisture to this area, this would be an ongoing longer-term drought concern. Because since then, this is the last 14 days, we can see there's the tail end of that system, but most of the rest of the country, a huge section of the United States here has been dry, all except for the Pacific Northwest and parts of Texas. Very limited moisture in the last 2 weeks. Stretch it out to 30 days, and this is the same map, but just 30 days out. Again, significant parts of the country that are expected to be on the drier side of things have been dry for a while. And we're all waiting on these systems I keep saying are going to come here. But right now, just not seeing it. We look out there again. This is the evolution of that pattern that I'm struggling with. So we're playing this through Thursday into Friday. That's when the California wave gets kicked out on Friday and Saturday, Sunday. But look how much farther to the south this trough is than where we expected it on yesterday's forecast video. It was much over Nebraska and Kansas versus down here into Texas. So that's what takes the moisture farther to the south. And where did my omega block go? It just kind of failed. There's now no longer a deeper low that's expected to develop over the west, out there around Thanksgiving. So the net effect of this pattern is to go into week 2 with lower confidence on what kind of wet would look like for week 2. And we just come back to these same maps. So the trend was more toward this area having better chances for being above normal. We watched a drying trend in the west out of this pattern and a drying trend in the central part of the United States. So what's confusing me about this is the fundamentals are still kind of there overall. I mean, we've got the MJO progressing into phase 8 and 1 where we said it would live, but the response in the Pacific Jet is just different. And I went looking for a lot of different reasons as to why that is, but I got to spend more time on this, okay? I do want to point out one important thing though. The newest European weeklies. I've been paying attention a lot in these last few videos to something called the Pacific North American Oscillation or Pacific North American Pattern. And the gist of it is this. If you're below the zero line, okay, we're talking about West Coast troughs. So we have the cutoff low right now. We know that there's ridging that's coming in soon. But the model dips it back down here. This was much lower in yesterday's forecast. But the newest longer range, just notice how the trend in the ensemble is going up over the next, 45, how far does this go? This goes out to the 29th of December. I mean, this is a long forecast here, all right? So what I'm concerned about is, if that is the case, if this actually happens, that this index, which follows the flow of the jet stream entering North America from the west, if we do make this progression up, that would signify that those longer range forecasts of colder air occupying the west longer may not verify. That would be a huge change. So I will be watching this carefully, the evolution of this index and what it means for the flow of the atmosphere. Like I said, I need more time with this pattern to figure out what I just did. There have been a few folks talking about our polar vortex, which right now is very strong. They're talking about a big disruption in December. I don't see it quite yet. Right now, the forecast for the polar vortex is for it to become even stronger and then just briefly weaken as we enter December. It's this little line right here. But what you're looking for is for it to just dive. If it did that, then we'd have something to talk about. But as it stands, we don't. But that kind of leads into a temperature discussion. Here's our latest frost potential map over the next 7 days. Not a whole lot of change overall in this. And the temperature pattern still brings in the heat early this week into the central U.S. So here's today's highs. I mean, if you look at the color bar, this is 27 to 29 degrees above average. Very mild conditions there. This is all rain-cooled air to the south. Then we get into Wednesday, another hot one for the central United States. Thursday is the same way. Getting into Friday, most of the country on Friday is mild. Saturday into Sunday, this is when the wave finally leaves the west and comes into the Rocky Mountains. And then what we're watching for is the setup next week for the delivery of some pretty cold air. So you saw it at the beginning here. Showed it to you with the the European model, just breaking this down day 10 through 15. The newest updates from the GFS ensemble are very similar. So there's the heat in the next 5 days. This is day 5 through 10. There's some cooler air east, and then this is day 10 through 15. So again, you kind of notice it's the corridor in through here that gets cooler rather than delivering that colder air into the western United States. So that's a big shift overall in all of the models. So I want to come back to the first thing we started with, which was South America. And if you take a look here, this is the actual forecast from the European model. And the frontal boundary is sneaking in right here. So there's the low. So they curl up clockwise in the southern hemisphere. And so after delivering more heavy rain, flooding to central Brazil, we're going to watch that frontal boundary. There it is. This is as we get in toward the end of this week, playing into the weekend. There's the front early next week, pressing through Mato Grosso do Sul into Mato Grosso, Goiás. There's going to be a lot of folks here that are ready for this. So it's a pretty robust signal. And it's not just in the operational run with all that cooler air behind it. It's also in the ensemble. So here's your next 5 days. This is a 5-day sliding window. This is day 5 through 10. So you can see that the models are more aggressive on the delivery of above average rainfall. But watch this. That goes out to day 5 through 10. Here's day 10 through 15. And if that doesn't look familiar, I don't know what does. But we watch the suppression again of drier conditions back into this area while the rain goes right back to where it's been for a while. All right, I will spend today looking at this. I'll be traveling in the Northwest. I should end up tonight in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It should be a lot of fun just to get out and see that beautiful place in this country. But we'll watch it carefully, and I'll talk to you in the morning. Thanks.